This movie is about borders. We're going to work out of the font group in the Home tab, and we'll start by taking a look at the preset command buttons for borders. We'll look at borders that are available as a preset for summary totals and for headers. We'll take the drawing tool and draw a border. We can use the drawing tool to draw a border grid. We can use the eraser tool to erase a border that's on the worksheet. And we can select a line color for the border and a line style for the border. I've got a bunch of areas with a fill color in the cells that are boxed out so that we can take a look at some of the border options in the font group. But before we do that, I want to turn off the grid from being displayed because that's going to get in the way of us visually seeing the impact of the border. To do that, left-click View, deselect or uncheck the box that says Grid Lines. And I'll go back to the Home tab. This is a nice way, by the way, to clean up your worksheet. If you have a schedule that you're producing out of a worksheet, this is a nice way to make it look sort of polished and finished. So the borders. Before we get to the borders, I'm going to select these two ranges. This range, hold the Control key down, and this other range, which is really just a cell, so that we can start going through the preset command buttons listed here on this drop-down. Now I have a range selected and a cell selected because these border selections, the first four, function the same way in that when I left-click bottom border, and I'll deselect so you can see the result, we have a bottom border that was added to the range that was selected and the cell that was selected. Selecting the range, Control, and the cell again, drop down, top border. Same thing happens at the top of both of them, left border and right border. Clicking off of that so you can see the result. We have a nice crisp border on all four sides of both the selected range and the cell. So these four buttons draw a border around the range that you've selected, whether that range includes several cells or just one. Selecting the next range, the next set of options that we have are to draw all borders, which draws a grid around the entire range we selected, framing out each cell within that range. We can draw an outside border, left-clicking, and we can draw an outside border that's a thicker line, thick box border. Those are a fair amount of options that we have on the standard preset commands that are available on that drop-down. But we have a few more that enable us to better visually see what's going on with a schedule of numbers. I've got some numbers displayed here, and I'm going to left-click and press F2 to show you that the number on the bottom is the sum of the numbers on the top, but you can't readily tell that by looking at this. Well, there's ways to make it sort of jump out by using some of the border options. I selected cell C27. I'm going to go back to the drop-down and left-click double border. And that sort of frames it out mathematically as to what's going on. It looks like maybe 200,000 is the sum of the numbers above because it's sort of got a standard math look to it. Left-clicking 100,000 again, I'll choose the next option, which is a thick bottom border, and that actually may look a little bit better than the first one. And that's sort of good, I guess, for a standalone series of numbers. But if you have a schedule that you have a cascading series of numbers that have subtotals along the way and maybe a grand total at the bottom, some of the other choices might work better. I'm going to left-click the total, $200,000. I'm saying dollars, it's 200,000. And left-click the third option, which is the top and the bottom border. That may frame out a mathematical subtotal in a schedule a little bit better than the two prior choices. And perhaps the fourth option might frame out the grand total at the bottom. And we have one more option, which is a double line on the bottom and a single line on the top. And again, that may be useful for the bottom of a schedule where the subtotals above maybe have the option to the left, a thick bottom line, or the option to the left of that, just two regular lines on the top and bottom. The next thing I want to take a look at is the drawing tool. We can actually draw a border by using the Draw Border tool. We get a grid, Since we don't have the grid lines displayed, we need a sort of a point of reference, and Excel gives us that point of reference by showing us the corner of each cell on our worksheet. I'll release, and I have drawn a border, escape, so I don't continue to draw a border. I've drawn a border around my selected range. The next option I have, drop down, is to draw a border grid. Again, Excel helps us out with the points of reference of the corners of each of the cells. I'll draw the grid, escape, and just that quickly, we draw a grid in whatever range we select after we initiate the drawing tool. The next option is to erase what we just did or what we've done in one of the prior steps. I'll erase this border. I'll erase this border. You can also get the eraser by pressing Control-Shift right after you create a border. So I'm going to use the drawing tool once again to draw a border right here where it was. And then holding down Control-Shift, I get my little eraser, which allows me to erase the border that I just drew. We also have the ability, and sometimes it's a little difficult, to draw a diagonal line across some cells. If you're careful enough, you can create a diagonal line, which can be useful for whatever you want to use it for. Lastly, we can change and alter the color and the style. I can pick a color, make it very different, and I'll pick a style, make that very different, and draw a border using that color and style. Escape, and we use the drawing tool, adjusted for those custom settings, the color and style, to draw a border around that selected range. All of these options are available in the Format Cells dialog box. We have the line styles, we have the color choices, we have the ability to get rid of all of the borders, outline the range or the cell, put borders inside the range if you have multiple cells, put a border on the top, the bottom, make it diagonal go in the other direction, put it on the right or the left. So that was all about borders. We found that we had a drop-down list in the font group on the Home tab that had presets for borders that we could use to draw a border around a selected range or cell across the bottom, top, left, or right. We had another set of commands that enabled us to draw borders around each cell within the selected range or around the entire perimeter of the selected range using a regular line or a thick line. We also had 5 options for borders that can be used, among other things, to sum numbers in a schedule so that you can visually call out the mathematical operations and the summing that was going on within the schedule. And lastly, we used the drawing tool to draw a border around a selected range, to draw a border grid within a selected range. We found we could draw diagonal lines using the tool, and we could choose a color for the line and a style of the line. And we found all of these options available in the Format Cells dialog box.